What what stuff happened besides the apparition appearing for her made her more traumatized? Like what other things happened that you know about?
Well, there's one story that I put in the books that was very hard. They did treat it in Paranormal Witness, but what they did was they combined two separate stories and made them together as one. It was the one where Cindy was trapped in the box, in the wood box. Well, Christine also had an incident. There was my mother at an auction had purchased an antique trunk that was in her my parents' bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't lock. The locks were completely rusted. It
Right.
was you couldn't lock it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a beautiful old trunk, just gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, our friend Kathy had come to the house, and we were all out on the front porch. It was summer. It was hot, and we were out playing guitar and singing and having a wonderful time together. We'd missed Kathy so much, hadn't seen her in a long time, and it was a really blissful day spent just the girls, my mom, Kathy, and the five of us. And I have no idea where my father was, but he was gone a lot, so that was typical. And mom decided it was time to eat, and she went into the kitchen and started making some tuna sandwiches for everybody. And I went into the kitchen and I helped her. And we were in there for a while. Kathy was in there. We were, just futzing around, laughing, listening to the radio, just playing, having a great time. And then when it was time to eat, nobody could find Christine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and nobody understood where she could have gone because we were all just together, all of us. And after a few minutes of calling her name, yelling out to her, uh, there was no response. And we, couldn't understand where she could have gone.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so we started looking for her. And mom sent Cindy out to check the rabbit cages, and um, somebody went out to the barn to check. We went all through the house, and she wasn't anywhere. And Chris had a proclivity for climbing up underneath beds to sleep. She wouldn't sleep on the bed, she'd sleep on the floor under the bed. We never understood why she did that, but
Okay.
she did when she was a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so we checked every bed, we checked underneath every bed, we went everywhere that we knew to look, and nobody could find Christine. And then the panic started setting in
Yeah.
because she was gone.
Mm-hmm.
And Kathy went back down into my mother's room, and she heard a whimpering sound, just a haunting whimpering sound, and started looking and calling and looking and calling. And then all of a sudden she thought, oh my God, the trunk. And she opened the trunk, and Christine was all curled up in a ball in the fetal position inside the bottom of this trunk, and was almost dead from hyperventilation and no oxygen. Because once the lid was closed, whatever air was in there was all the air that was available. And she lifted her up and pulled her out. She was saturated with sweat, laid her on my mother's bed, and my mother and yelled, Kathy yelled for my mom to come. And when my mother came into the room, Christine just like freaked out and backed away from my mom. And nobody understood why this was happening. And mom sent me to go to the bathroom and get a wet rag, and we bathed her face off, and she was crying and crying, and she said, "Mom, why did you do that? Why did you put me in the box?" And mom's like, "Honey, I didn't put you in the box. I was in the kitchen making lunch." And she's like, "No, no, no, you put me in the box. Why did you do that to me? Why? Why?" And, Christine could not reconcile what had happened. Well, what actually happened
Right.
was that Chris had gone to lay down on my mother's bed
Mm-hmm.
and had fallen asleep. And she was told by a spirit who was using my mother's voice
Yeah. I'm
to,
sorry. The cats.
Sorry.
That's okay. There's no problem with cats. No problem with cats. I love the cats. Love them.
I'm a dog person.
I'm a cat person.
I'm a dog person too. I'm a dog person too. I love them all.
I'm an everything person.
Yeah, I'm an everything, all animals person.
We have a lot of animals.
Yeah, you can't have too many as far as I'm concerned. So,
there you go.
But anyway.
Yeah, you listen to her. They will open your heart and your mind to unconditional love. They're very important to have in your life, trust me.
It's okay, we'll move to 11 soon.
Yeah,
that's good.
Oh, yeah.
I always had between 11 and 15 animals living with me at all times, always. I'm surprised there was ever any room on my bed for me, actually. But anyway, she said, she told Kathy, my mother left the room, and she told Kathy that Mom had come in the room and told her to get in the box, to go get in the box. But she couldn't open her eyes, and she couldn't move. She was paralyzed. And something lifted her up off the bed and placed her inside the antique trunk and closed the lid. And she couldn't open the lid. Now, that wasn't my mother that did that, but it had my mother's voice. That happened more than once, where voices were thrown. It's happened to me. Or in spirit box sessions, where the spirits that I'm talking to are actually using my voice to try to talk to me, at which point George is like, no, if you want to communicate with us, you use your own voice.
Yeah.
You don't throw Andrea's voice, no. They have remarkable abilities. Remarkable.
I bet.
And so Christine was never able to reconcile that. But the interesting thing is that my mother never referred to the antique trunk as a box. She only referred to it as the antique trunk.
Yeah.
But the spirit that lifted my sister off that bed and put her in the box, that's how that spirit referred to it. Christine is 54 years old, or shortly will be, and she still can't wrap her mind around what happened or how that happened or why Mom would have ever done anything like that to her. Well, Mom didn't. Mom didn't. Mom was with us in the kitchen making tuna fish sandwiches and tomato soup.
That kind of there is a portion in the movie where the Warrens were listening to a audio clip at their house where the audio was just non-existent from your mother. Did something similar to that ever actually happen, or were there ever voice recordings?
Yes.
What?
Yeah, the Warrens actually came to the house 4 or 5 times during the course of their investigation over a year and a half, and did their utmost to board my mother, talking to them, and very often the recordings would come back blank.
And why do you think that happened? Do you have like a theory on why that happened, or?
I can't really say.
Do you think just like the hate for your mother kind of like blocked her out and made her, like not there in a sense?
I don't know. I really can't explain why.
One of the theories behind paranormal appearances or activity is that they suck the energy out of the room and out of objects near them. Possibly the interviews could have sparked their interest in the conversations, to the point where they pulled all that energy out of the room, which could have stopped recordings or something like that.
The spirit that did not want her mother there, obviously did not want your mother to, have a voice, to have a say, to be involved, so that could have been like another thing, just not wanting your mother to be there.
Well, Mrs. Warren has her own theory about that, and that is that my mother was in a state of oppression, and that was being taken over by the spirit who wanted her to leave the house, and since she would leave the home and abandon her husband and her children, that she was infiltrated from within, and that the reason that her voice did not show up on the audio was because it wasn't really my mother talking.
Oh, wow.
That's unbelievable.
Do you still have close connections with
Miss Warren.
Miss Warren?
The last time I saw her was the first time that I had seen her in 40 years.
Wow.
And it was just prior to the opening of the film.
Yeah.
And she and I were invited to a private screening of The Conjuring about 3 months before the premiere. And she and her son-in-law came out of the elevators in the lobby of the hotel. We were all staying in the same hotel. And we were all supposed to meet the limousine to take us over to Warner Brothers Studios. And Cindy, my sister, came with me. And we walked out of, there were 2 sets of elevators side by side. And they both opened simultaneously. And we walked out, and Mrs. Warren came out the other one. And she opened her arms and embraced both of us and knew us instantly.
Wow.
And we just cried and cried.
How did you guys react when you first saw the film? Like, what was the feeling like?
We cried and cried.
Cried. Cried. Okay.
We had a box of tissues that they provided us with, and we passed it around.
Wow.
Were you happy with it?
Yeah, like, where were the tears from, you know?
It was just the emotional release of seeing our story told, and even though it was inaccurate in many ways, there were many, many touching moments in the film and things that were shocking to us, shocking in this respect. They didn't know our whole story. For instance, there are 25,000 different kinds of wallpaper that they could have chosen to do the art design, the set design in the house, and they chose the one pattern that we had on our walls at the farm. They didn't know that. They had never seen any photographs of the inside of the house when we lived there, and yet chose that. Remember the scene where the camera comes around the corner into Shanley Caswell's bedroom, who played May, and she had her own room in the house, and the camera comes around and there's a picture of a white cat, a folk art drawing of a white cat up on the mantel board.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Wow. That's crazy.
I've had this with me since my mother's friend Cedarback gave it to me for my 13th birthday when we lived at the farm. We found it at a flea market in Foster, Rhode Island, and it was 50 cents, and my mom didn't have 50 cents to buy it for me, but Fran did, and she gave it to me for my 13th birthday, and it's been with me ever since. They didn't know anything about it. It wasn't in the books. Nobody ever told them, and there was this picture propped up on the mantel board of my bedroom in the movie.
That's
No way.
That's awesome.
No way.
That's
You know, I mean, I never even wrote about the fact that our dog was bizarrely, inexplicably killed as soon as we moved to the farm, and there it was in the movie. There it was, and I lost it. I just lost it. I mean, I couldn't even believe. How could they intuit that? Where did that come from? How did they know this? They couldn't have known this. You know, it's what I call the cosmic kisses of The Conjuring. It tells me that it's okay, just the way it is. Because it got our story out in ways that nothing else could have, ever. And I just have to be okay with it. You know, if I live true to my own principles, then what I say, which is everything happens with purpose and reason, and it's right and proper time, then that applies to everything, including The Conjuring. You know, it would be impossible, absolutely impossible, to compress 10 years of experiences of an entire family into a 2-hour movie. So they did the best they could with what they had. And I thought they made a very compelling film. To represent the Warrens as the uh, devout Roman Catholic ghost hunters that came in and solved all our problems was grossly inaccurate. But I don't believe that the Warrens tried to do anything to harm us or to exploit us in any way. They literally were in over their heads, as I mentioned before. They didn't know what they were dealing with in that house, and they did the best they could with what they had.
And was it your mother who sought them out, or did they come up? No.
No, she, and that was another thing that kind of tipped her off too, because it was Keith Johnson who actually brought the Warrens into our lives. My mother had no idea who they were when they came to our house. And he told them in August or September of 1973, and they came the night before Halloween. Thinking that that's when they stood the best chance, being superstitious as they are and were, that they thought that was when the veil would be thinnest and that they would stand the best chance of experiencing, some type of supernatural activity or, seeing an apparition in the house. And what they didn't understand is that there is no veil and that they stood as good a chance any day or night of the year at seeing something or having an experience in that house, and they did. They had repeated experiences in the house, and so did some of the people that they brought with them subsequently. Things that none of those individuals will ever forget. So, they didn't understand the nature of a haunting. They thought that, they had it framed a certain way, in the way that they looked at it. But it wasn't the reality of it. The reality is that we are all surrounded by spirit all of the time. Some of us more so than others. Depending, I think, upon our sensitivity, our exposure, or even overexposure to the other side. That the farmhouse was actually a portal, only cleverly disguised as a farmhouse. That it was a place where, for whatever reason, energies converged and different realms intersected. And so we saw things in that house. I'll tell you a perfect case in point. I would think one of the most fascinating stories of all in our memoir. My mother was wasting away, just wasting away. It was after the seance that had gone so terribly wrong that she almost paid with her life. And you saw that in Paranormal Witness, their treatment of that, which was way toned down compared to how bad it was. But she was just so frail and was aging at such a dramatic rate. And we were all so very concerned for her. And I had virtually taken over the role of mother figure. I was only 15 years old, but somebody had to do it because mom was indisposed. And this particular day, she'd been in bed almost all day long into the night. And I had come home from school. I made dinner, helped my sisters with their homework, got everybody tucked into bed, and I was sitting in the parlor doing my own homework. And it was about 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night, and my mother came out of her bedroom, and I'd built a big fire in the fireplace, keep the house as warm as possible. And she looked at me and she said, "What's for dinner? I'm hungry." And I was like, oh, music to my ears. Oh, my mother actually wants to eat. Wonderful news. And I said, I made beef stew. And she said, oh, that sounds good. And would you make a pot of coffee? I'm like, Mom, it's 11 o'clock at night. You want to drink coffee? And she's like, yes, it's the nectar of the gods. I'm like, okay, Mom, I'll make some coffee for you. And I went through the dining room that was completely shut down for the night. All the lights were off. Walked through the front foyer, into the kitchen, into the pantry, had to get the pot of stew out of the refrigerator and warm it, because it was before the days of microwaves. They didn't even exist yet. And so I had to, take out some beef stew, put it in a smaller pot, warm it, make coffee. So I was gone for a number of minutes. Meanwhile, she turned to throw another big log on the fireplace, in the fireplace. And then as she was putting the screen back in place in front of it, she heard laughter behind her. And she turned around and looked into the dining room that was now completely lit with oil lamps and candles, and an entire family was sitting around a table that was not our own table, and furniture that was not our own furniture. There was a woman cooking over the fireplace, in a fireplace that had been sealed shut for more than 100 years, and telling her children to go take their places at the bench, on the bench at the table. And there were two men sitting on the opposite side of the table, and one of them turned to the parlor, and he saw my mother, and they made direct eye contact, and then he nudged the man beside him and pointed her out, and she was the ghost. They were looking into the future while she was looking into the past. And when I came back into the room, all the lights were out again. Everything was as it was when I had gone through just a few minutes earlier. But there was my mother standing on the hearthstone in front of the fireplace, beaming, just smiling from ear to ear. And I said, "Oh, you must be hungry." And she said, "All my questions were just answered. Everything was just answered."
Wow.
She understood. It made sense to her. And it was the beginning of her healing that brought her back to us.
Wow. So in a way, the house healed her after it caused all that harm.
Yes, that's very well put, yes.
And back to before you guys, moved into the house and everything happened and stuff. I was just curious about your two Siamese cats. Did they ever come back to you? Like, did you ever find them, or they were just gone?
No, we did find out who got them. A woman over on Roland Street had purchased them from the criminals who stole them out of our house. And I went and confronted her and said, "I understand that you have our cats." And I was just a little kid. Yeah. And she said, "I don't have any cats." And I could see them in the house. I could see our cats in the house. But she wouldn't let me in the house, and she said, "I don't have any cats," and she slammed the door in my face. I know who had our cats.
Yeah. And did that boy, because it explained in the start of the book as well, how you got, you were becoming very troubled with everything that was going on around you with the criminals and stuff, and you beat the kid up pretty bad. Did you feel like a surge, like, of energy or something like that? Or, like, what, was it that, did something take you over and make you kind of express yourself that way, or was it just everything building up around you?
I think it was the first time in my life that I ever felt hatred.
Okay.
And I wanted to hurt him as badly as he hurt Scrunch. Which, if you extrapolate that out, I wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
Now, this was so contrary to who I was as an individual, even at that young age, that it totally freaked my mother out.
Yeah.
That I would be that violent.
Yeah.
That I was even capable of being that violent. The only thing that saved him, and I did a lot of damage to him, believe me, I knew where to strike. And I went for it. I did. That little SOB is still in pain. I swear to God. It was an older boy, a young man that lived right across the street that actually pulled me off of him and saved him, because I wasn't done.
Yeah.
I wasn't done.
You weren't gonna stop
wanted him
until...
to feel the pain that she felt before she died.
Yeah.
And do you think, like, your connection to nature and your connection to animals is what made you feel that so, extreme?
I think it was my love for her
Yeah.
that caused me to feel so much hatred for her killer.
Yeah.
Wow. One thing I wanted to add, this probably might be a sentimental subject, but Christine's rabbits.
Oh, can't even talk about that with Christine. To this day, cannot discuss the rabbits. She won't read the books. Christine will not read the books. She got up to about page 60 or 65 of volume 1 and walked out of her room and handed the book to me with tears in her eyes and said, I can't do this. I'm sorry. I would love to read it, but I can't. I can't do it. The only person in my family who has read all 3 books from start to finish is also the bravest person in my family, and that's my mother.
Yeah.
Yeah, Christine cannot discuss. We cannot even.
Yeah.
No.
Because after I read that, I was like, yeah, I don't think she would like to talk about this ever again.
No.
That was. How did Nancy and April react to the books? Did they read some of it?
No. April said she read the first volume. And I'll take her at her word. They've all got them.
Yeah.
Every member of the family has the trilogy in their possession.
Yeah.
No. A little too close to home. And their attitude is, we lived it. Why do we need to relive it?
Yeah.
We had to relive it enough just telling you our stories, our personal stories over again. And I knew most of them. I would say 98% of the significant things, what I perceived to be the significant things, the most profound things that happened at the farm are in the 3 books. I would say that probably there are 2 or 3 stories that did not make the books, and they were so personal and so painful that they were left out purposely.
Right.
Cindy, there was one in particular that was just so traumatic and so intense for Cindy that she asked me to please leave it out, and I honored her wishes on that. Christine had one that she said, please don't put it in the book, and my mother had one that said, please don't put it in the book. And so I honored their wishes, but I would say 98% of the major events that occurred at the farm are in there. And, the other things, I don't think that anybody outside of our family will ever know.
Yeah.
Right.
I have shared, and my family has shared some of it with George. They all love George very much, and they know how important he is to me. And he's my paranormally brilliant para partner, and he's a member of our family. George Lopez I'm a member of his family.
Right.
There's a familial connection between us that is absolutely eternal. There's nothing I wouldn't do for the man. I love him deeply.
Yeah.
We travel together, we lecture together, we do our radio show together, we write together. In a Flicker is a masterwork. And I can say that because it's his idea, all I did was take his raw material and turn it into a novel. And I don't mean to say all I did. It was a hell of a lot of work, but, and yes, I contributed as much to it ultimately as he did, but it was his idea. And so I credit him with, I would never have come up with this. Not in a billion years would I have come up with In a Flicker. Never. It's just so wow.
So it's something that we should read eventually.
Yeah, I'm definitely.
That we should pick up.
Not the stomach for it. It's really intense. Really, really intense. And it's actually set in England.
Okay.
Yes. In fact, you, my darling, may help me get In a Flicker out into England, into the UK.
Yeah, no bother. I have a bunch of family and friends in England and Ireland, So.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I'll send you the link. I'll hook up with you on Facebook.
Definitely.
Get the information to help me get that out there, because it really is. It really is an homage to England.
Where is it based in England? Do you know? We're just all about.
It's set at Oxford University.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Interesting.
Nice.
Is it like a paranormal kind of story, or is it? How is it like?
It has a little supernatural twist to it that's truly wicked. But it is predominantly a piece of historical fiction mixed with nonfiction.
Okay.
It is the very worst of it is pulled right from the annals of history of English history.
Okay.
The very toughest part of it to read is it comes right out of London, and it's a story that you only think you know.
Yeah.
Let me leave you with that. You only think you know.
I'm definitely gonna give that a shot now. I'm borrowing his books right now, but I'm gonna get myself my own copies of them, because so far absolutely fabulous. And I'll have to give Into the Flicker, you said?
In a Flicker.
Oh, In a Flicker. Yeah, I'll have to definitely give that a look.
Yeah, it will shock you. It will mesmerize you. You'll be lost in it. It will change the way you think about everything in very much the same way that the trilogy does.
Yeah.
And even though it's entirely different subject matter, it has a very cosmically expansive way of changing your mind, opening your mind to consider the possibilities.
Yeah.
It really is. I'm very proud of it. It's a fascinating read. It's a very, very difficult read. It's extremely emotional.
Yeah.
You be able to shed it from your mind when you're done. It will haunt you. It will haunt you for the rest of your life. You'll never forget a single one of the characters, not ever.
Okay.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, me too. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
And then after it has blown your mind wide open, you have to tell 1,000 of your closest friends each.
Yeah, my mother and I, we have very, similar taste in books. Like, we swap books and all that kind of stuff. And, my mother, I feel like you'd absolutely love her. She is a spiritual person as well, and she believes in a lot of this stuff too, and she has her dreams. She knew that my brother's ex-girlfriend was pregnant before he even told her. She told me before he told her, and like stuff like that, and
she's into it. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. We both are, I have a lot in my gut feelings. Like, I feel a lot,
Mm-hmm.
I know when something is not good, or I know when something is dangerous, or it makes me uncomfortable,
Yeah, I think you remember this. I believe it was last year that we went to investigate Colonial Williamsburg. Y'all remember that?
Oh, yeah.
It's there's this colonial area over here that's known to be haunted, and we just went out to just see what we could find, just
for fun.
Just for fun. And a couple minutes into it, Rosine said that, you know what, guys, I don't feel good. I want to leave. Like, within 5 minutes of getting there, she just felt like something was bothering her.
Like, it's like suffocating, It's like you feel something like on your chest, and you can't breathe properly and all that kind of stuff. And, for a while I thought I had breathing problems, but it's just certain places and certain things, and I don't know whether that's just fear, or I don't know whether that's something putting it there, like something physically on me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you were an attempted attachment to you. And it's a good thing that you removed yourself. And I'll teach you how to protect and block yourself.
Yeah.
I've had to learn that myself because I'm so spiritually open that I'm like an open book, an open door. It's like, boom, they come right to me. I'm a magnet for spirits. And I've had to, over time, and George has been very helpful with me in terms of this, learning how to protect myself and put myself in the bubble, as it were, to keep a day where they can come, and yet they're still,
arm's length away.
Yeah, and I think you guys definitely remember this. Before we even got there, like before we parked, you all remember the apparition that we saw? That was before we parked. You remember seeing him, right?
Which one? Because I saw a few things that night. I saw.
I didn't see him, but you said that before we even parked, they saw a man standing there with his arms crossed like this.
Oh, yeah.
And then
I saw that like same man, we were walking down like the cobblestone and stuff, you know, and you know there was like a few people. It wasn't too late at night, so there were a few people walking around. But on like the other side of the road, you know, I saw that man kind of just like.
And a second afterwards, like
tense.
He wasn't there. He disappeared. And
it's weird.
Yeah. So don't tell me you don't see ghosts when I now know that you do see ghosts.
I do.
I feel like it's not as open as it used to be. You know, I feel like I'm not as in touch with it, and I wish I could see it more clearly, and I wish I could see, you know, more clearly, and I was a lot more open to it. I feel like I'm not open enough, you know.
You will be.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't think I've ever seen anything, and if I have, I haven't recognized it. The only thing that I've ever happened to me was I was here in this house when I was living alone, and I had just gone to bed and I was laying down, the door was locked, the pets were in there with me, and I just started to hear something just outside my window, which was right behind me. I was like, what is that? And it started to sound like footsteps, right? And the footsteps sounded like they were getting closer, walking on the grass, and then I heard them on the concrete right up to the stairs in front of the house. They walked up the stairs, and I was like, okay, someone's here very late at night. I just heard the footsteps continue past the door directly into the hallway, or the foyer, and right into the hallway, right where my door was. And then it stopped, and I was like, that was weird. I didn't hear the door open, no one knocked, and there was footsteps, and it just ended. And then about 5 minutes later, from what it sounded like, someone was wearing really, really heavy boots. They like ran across the house, and I was just sitting there in bed, terrified of what had just happened.
Right.
And then for about 15 to 20 minutes, this whatever it was ran up and down the hallway, and I was just sitting there, just like frozen in fear, laying in my bed. I was contemplating, all right, where's the knife in my room? I don't remember anywhere, but I was too scared to even move my head because I didn't want to make any noise. Then it stopped for another 30 minutes, and for a while I started to get calm. I was like, okay, this was in my head, and I started to fall asleep, and all of a sudden it just started running up and down this hallway again for another 15 to 20 minutes, and I was just like, I just want to escape, I want to leave. And then it stopped for another moment, walked to the end of the hallway, walked back from where it came, and I just heard it walk off into like the yard, and that was it. It was gone. It happened one other time. It was shorter that time, and then I've never heard of it since then. I just don't know what it was about, what it was from, or it was just the weirdest thing. I've told a few of my friends about it, but
yeah, it's stunning when it happens. We used to hear footsteps all through the house all the time, and of course the farmhouse was, you know, it was finished as it is now in 1736. Every floorboard creaked, and you know, every latch had a different sound from every other latch, and the stairs made their own sounds when there was any weight on them, and we would often hear footsteps coming up the stairs, and then they would stop at the landing, just stop. And we never knew. I mean, Cindy, even in the books, Efren, you know, Cindy's essay in volume 3 talked about the scariest part of living at the farm was never knowing who was on the other side of the door.
And that was one thing I was going to ask, like, what your family felt. I'm sure that was one of the things that you guys felt living there. The suspense of what's going to happen next.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Waiting for that next shoe to drop. Just waiting. What's next?
Did, in the film, they show the doors sometimes when things would happen, the doors would close and they won't open. Did that actually happen? Like when something would happen? Okay.
That was true.
Wow.
And there are elements of truth in The Conjuring. There are.
Okay.
You know, there are incidents that are very similar to things that did happen. You know, some of my sisters did have their legs pulled, did have their hair pulled, did get trapped in rooms where there was no reason for the door to remain stuck closed, and yet it couldn't be opened. There were moments of crisis. There were moments of absolute crisis. Was Nancy picked up and thrown against a glass wall in the parlor? No. You know, they would take, James Wan took things that happened to us and changed them, changed them. For instance, the onslaught of crows. You know, part of our story is about crows, but the onslaught was bats. It was bats, not crows, and not in that kind of number. Although there were many nights there would be hundreds of them flying around the house at night, literally hundreds of them, and that happened a lot, all the time. But he made that a much more ominous thing, you know, where one of the birds comes flying through the side of the glass of the car window, you know. But there are stories in the trilogy, as you read the book, my dear friend will tell you, that you'll see it in your mind. You'll actually see what's happening in your mind. It will become like a movie in your own mind. And you'll feel like you lived there with us, that you were actually with us while these things were happening.
And like I've told you before, sometimes I'll read something, I'll have to put it down because I feel like I just replayed what just happened in my head. And sometimes things will be so intense that I wouldn't even be able to sleep at night because it's just replaying over and over in my head. You know, and I'm thinking, wow, if that's me, imagine if it was them, how they went through that, you know? You know, for that to happen, it scares me, but yet you guys actually happen in real life.
Well, a truly enlightening way to grow up. And enlightenment is not an easy thing. It's difficult, no matter how it comes to you. The awareness is hard to swallow because we're all relegated to living in a three-dimensional, five-sensory realm, and that is not the truth of our existence. Not by a long shot. And so when you have to pry open wide the third eye, and you don't have a choice but to believe what you're seeing, it changes the way you think and feel about everything. It changes your perspective on life and death and afterlife. It is truly remarkable, and I would even say miraculous experience. And I know that I will spend the rest of my life talking about our story and opening myself up to the individuals who trust in me and believe in me enough to take my word for what happened to our family, much like the three of you who I consider friends. And I know that we'll be together, we'll meet. I know that we will. We're supposed to, you see. And so this is our first meeting, and I'll never forget this. This has just been wonderful to talk with the three of you, and I really thank you for this opportunity. You were so funny. We were like, you'll do an interview with me? Really? Before, doofus, you know?
Sorry.
That's okay. Everything in its right and proper time.
Right.
And I'm really so delighted to spend the evening with you tonight. I do actually have another interview to do shortly, so I have to go. But this is West Coast, and also a recording, so I have to go do that. But we'll do this again, and just save up the questions that I didn't ask, and produce this, and then we'll do a follow-up to it later on, okay?
Try to hammer through that book as fast as possible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I got more questions. I'm sure they do, too.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So we'll definitely talk and plan for our second one, and we'll figure out when we could do it.
Okay.
I just have one more thing. I haven't, read all the books yet, so I don't really have that to go by. All I do have to go by is the movie. And did things happen, like, to your mother that you couldn't hear? Like, if the door slammed and she was trying to bang on it for it to open, that did happen and nobody could hear it?
Nope.
Wow.
Yep, that's true. Absolutely true.
I can't imagine how terrifying it must have been for her.
She's a very, very strong woman, an amazing human being, amazing. She's 76 years old and she's still kicking butt.
Well, thank you again for spending this time.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.
We'll definitely plan a second interview, most definitely.
Great. Sometime in February.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
I will.
February.
I have a pretty open schedule in February. I'm working predominantly on the screenplay. So I will definitely make time to do this with you again. And I love you all. And thank you so much for inviting me into your home and into your life and into your heart tonight.
Thank you so much.
Much.